Content warning: the stories and themes shared throughout this podcast may contain themes that can be distressing for you. If needed, please pause and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. If needed, please reach out to a mental health professional for support.
Welcome back to another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. But you'll notice Alana is not in the chair with me. It is Dr. Kimberly Rich. That's the only time I'm going to use doctor today because she is humble.
Thank you.
So Kim received her doctoral degree from Creighton University with a research focus in grief and bereavement. Her journey with grief started following the sudden loss of her mother in 2021. It was then that she first recognized the power of relationship in grief and also the ways that we can fail to support one another as end of life approaches, as well as in times of grief. In the coming months, she accepted that her mission would be to improve how we approach death, dying, and supporting those who are grieving. She now serves as a death doula, end-of-life coordinator, and grief educator. She's been published multiple times and has a podcast, The Only Guarantee. Kimberly is based out of the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, but regularly travels to support those in needs. You can learn more about her. Her website's tomorrowmorningllc.com, and same with her Instagram handle, and it's all going to be in the show notes below. And I am so honored to meet you. Well, I mean, I've met you, but to have you here and for you to meet everyone else listening. So welcome to the show, Kimberly.
I'm happy to be here with you and get to know you a little bit better, I hope too, as we talk. So happy to be here.
Before we begin, what's your mom's name?
My mom's name was Donna.
Is Donna?
Yes, Donna.
What's like Donna?
Yep.
It's our accents. You have the Chicago accent, and I have the Canadian accent.
My husband is Canadian, and so it's so funny because when he is with his family, he'll slip into it a little bit. He also totally recognizes it. Like the announcer at our son's high school, like for weeks, my husband was like, "He's Canadian." And then he finally asked him. He was like, "Are you Canadian?" He was like, "Yep." And there's something slightly different. I don't notice it as much, but
yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like sometimes people flat out are like, "Whoa, you are so Canadian." And some people are like, "I had no idea."
Like, what is it? Yeah. What is it that gives me away?
So Donna, tell me. So Donna died. What's the date of her death?
April 2nd of 2021, April 2. It was her dad's birthday. He was not alive anymore, but it was on her dad's birthday.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of a neat little connection. I don't know that it's like, I don't know if it's supposed to be sad or comforting, but there was something about it that felt kind of, I don't know, kind of comforting to me. Yes, poetic. Like it just felt there was zero good to be found in the situation. But, if you were searching for something to give you comfort, I like numbers and dates and some of that fun, that stuff can be a little bit fun. So
I want to know all about Donna. Tell me about Donna.
I will tell you about her. I think as we all do in grief, right? Most of what I remember is perfection. There are times the imperfect creeps back and it actually makes me smile because it's also comforting to remember that she was a human, right? So when people die, especially those people that we're grieving and that we miss, we just are so aware of everything we miss. And that's probably most of what I'll share with you today. But I think it's also important just to kind of state that she was imperfect too, just like I'm imperfect. And, my kids will remember my flaws and hopefully my strengths when I am gone. And so she was a great mother. And again, we had our disagreements about things, but usually about things that as you age and you gain in wisdom, you understand, right? Things like curfews or I actually wrote in my Skin Deep story, like the first time I didn't drink at alcohol. I rarely drink alcohol now, but I didn't drink until years after my friends. Like my friends were drinking in high school. I didn't. I would leave parties. I was so concerned. I ran track and cross country. We used to have to sign a code of conduct, which is just a stupid, ridiculous thing. But it was like, if you do anything naughty, you're off the team. And to me, that was like a binding contract. And I was so worried. And so it was the end of my freshman year of college. I had a beer. And I told my mom, and she just like started crying because she was just so sad that, I had had a beer. And, she was just a good person who, again, like wanted us to be good people and to follow the rules and to help others. And she was a teacher. She was wonderful with children. She was wonderful with us. She would take us on, our parents, both of them took us on vacations. We traveled. Which I didn't recognize was unique again until I got older, and you realize that not everybody does that. But we drove mostly. The first time we flew anywhere was to Hawaii when I was in high school. Um, they School education was important to her, of course, as a teacher, and became important to me. She had a great sense of humor. She was happy. She enjoyed being with us, watching TV with us, taking us out to eat, taking us to the bookstore, going to libraries, going to museums, going to the public pool. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but here in the suburbs of Chicago, like every town has a public pool you'd buy the pass for in the summer. And we'd go there and she'd let us get, ice cream. And when I was in college, I'm going to age myself. I don't know, the average age of your listeners, but when I went to college, it was before you had cell phones and texting. It was at the very beginning of email, but you used to have to pay by the minute for long distance,
Hmm.
which I know is just such a foreign concept now. But for whatever reason, Sundays were half price. So, like, we'd call on Sundays because it was half price and you would get twice as much time to talk. And I would always look forward to, I went to school at Arizona State and she was still outside of Illinois or outside of Chicago in Illinois. So, I would so look forward to calling her on Sundays and having that time to fill her in. And I would always feel a little homesick after talking to her, just missing out on the meals she was cooking at home, what she was doing with, I was the oldest, so what she was doing with my sisters. We would send letters back and forth. And then as an adult, I had children very young. I got married a year after I graduated college. I had my first child when I was 23, which is absurd now. My oldest is 22. And the thought of him like being in charge of another human is just nauseating. And
Yeah.
I think he would agree. Like I won't be embarrassed if he hears this podcast. I wonder, and she's gone now, so I can't ask, but I sometimes wonder now if she thought that about, was she just, when I was like, I'm pregnant, was she like, what the hell? But she was so good about calming me as a parent and giving advice, right? And even as my kids were aging and you think, you're doing it wrong because they're upset or something didn't go right. She was really good about sharing those stories about the time she struggled with that also, and was always supportive of my children and my marriage and my career choices. And there was very little that she didn't allow me to try and cheer me on along the way, which was awesome. I knew I was loved. And I know now as an adult that even that in itself was a gift. I know not everyone has felt that from their mother. And I always knew how much she cared about me.
I love that. Donna sounds amazing.
She
And
was.
um, talk us through what was going on leading up to April 2nd.
Sure. So, um, I'm going to try to make an 18-year story very short. One of the things I struggle with when you talk about grief or share your grief stories, and I'm sure you've heard this from other people you've talked to, is that question of um, did you expect them to die, right? People will say that, was this expected? And I think for people asking that question, um, if you say yes, I think they ask because there's some relief in that, right? Oh, so you knew this was coming, right? You
Mm,
had time to prepare, you had time to say goodbye.
mm.
Um, I think that's kind of a bullshit question. I think it's kind of stupid, right? But I mean, the way I handle it now, I use a lot of humor, but when people ask, I'm like, well, did I expect her to ever die? I did, right? Like, I'm going to die too, so people should expect me to die. Like, there's no one who avoids it, so we should all expect to die. But she had been diagnosed with lymphoma in 2003. She fought that. It was horrific. and went into remission. In 2005, she had a reoccurrence, fought that, but she had a transplant at that time. I believe it was a bone marrow transplant. I should have written this down because I always get it and stem cell confused, but I believe it was a bone marrow transplant. Survived, and was relatively symptom free then from probably 2006 until about 2020. And then in 2020, she started with a cough and she couldn't get rid of the cough. And, all these things were happening. And very long story short, her lungs were damaged. She had what was called interstitial lung disease, is what she was diagnosed with. And it was damage that was happening to her lungs because they believed her body was rejecting that transplant from years and years and years ago. And what it was doing was stiffening her lungs. So the way a doctor explained it once to me was that normal lungs are like a birthday party balloon where you can blow it up and the air will come out, and you blow it up and the air comes out. But then lungs that become more damaged and stiff are more like car tires. So even when you're putting air in them, you don't see car tires expand really or deflate unless you have a completely flat tire. And so she was starting to have a very hard time breathing, was on oxygen. She was very young. She was in her early 60s and was going to need a double lung transplant. And they actually went back and forth on that. They were like, we might be able to do one lung, we could do two, kind of depending upon the donor situation. We just want to get something, right? So if we have a donor who only has one good lung, we'll do that. If they have two, we'll do that. And so they kind of went back and forth on it. And there is an enormous process you have to go through to be on the transplant list. And that's a good thing, mostly out of, what do they call it? They call it out of like respect for the donor and the donor's family. They want to make sure that the organs that are being donated are going to a healthy recipient and
Mm-hmm.
someone who's going to take care of them, which I
Yeah.
think if I was donating my organs, I'd really appreciate that. So there's a whole process, a training process, things you have to agree to before you get listed. She did all of that. She was listed in February of 21. And one of the things that was shared with us was that her wait time, the average wait time is like 30 to 60 or 90 days, but that it tends to be a little shorter in the spring. This is such a ridiculous, like Jeopardy fun fact, but it tends to be a little shorter in the spring because the majority of organ donors are um, people who have been in a motorcycle accident, and motorcycle riding tends to increase in the spring.
Wow.
So, such a weird side story that the transplant team shared with us, but something that we were like, so hopefully we're looking at 30 to 60 days here. Like we're going to be in the shorter range of things. And not that we were hoping for anyone. It's such a weird ethical thing to be involved in, right? Because in order to save her life, so it costs someone else a life, and
Mm-hmm.
that is a separate podcast episode. But something else to kind of talk through is just how that kind of messes with your emotions and your feelings. Also, when you're hoping for this transplant and hoping for her to survive, it's a little different than like a kidney transplant where you can have a living donor. So
Mm-hmm.
there is also some weird emotions with that, but we were hopeful that quickly she would be in a position to receive that lung. While she was waiting on March 3rd of 21, she came down with a fever. She texted our family group text, and it's funny. She just said, I don't want anybody to freak out, right? Because we were all kind of nervous about her at that point. But as I mentioned when I first started talking, I did not expect her to die. So was it expected? No. That might have been naive of me, but I did not. And I don't want anybody to freak out, but I've got a fever. They want me to go to the hospital. Well, this was the height of COVID, right? And she had been told multiple times if she got COVID, she probably would not survive. And although she had been really living in isolation, her and my dad both were just in total lockdown. We were nervous. And I remember thinking, as long as it's not COVID, right? As long as
Yeah.
it's not COVID. And it was not. It was just some random virus. It's actually a virus that you and I don't remember the name of it, but you and I probably come in contact with all the time. But because we have healthy immune systems, it doesn't even impact us. But her immune system was wonky. She went into the hospital March 3rd and just slowly her body started shutting down. Like her body couldn't handle the virus. And so she was awake at first. After a while of being in the hospital and things getting harder and harder, she was eventually intubated. Her kidneys shut down, and then her heart. And the way the doctors explained it is you have your three main organs are your lungs, your kidneys, and your heart. And every time one of those stops working, it puts more pressure on the others. Once her lungs and her kidneys were not working, the pressure that that was putting on her heart was just enormous. And she was not able to live long enough to receive that transplant. And we lost her. And so for me, I can only speak for me. It was unexpected. Although she was ill, we had a path towards recovery. It was just a matter of time, right? Um, in hindsight, I have regrets in thinking that, right? Because I did not treat it as a opportunity to ask questions I wish I had asked or say things I wish I had said or I just treated this as we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this.
Wow.
And that's hard afterwards. I think the hardest part of it is feeling like I should have recognized the gravity of the situation
Y-
and I didn't.
Kimberly, thank you for sharing all of that. Like, that's quite a harrowing story. And I can't even imagine what that would have been like having to go through that. And it's what really resonates with me, and that is, at the beginning, you're like, like, yes, I know my mom will die. Like, I will die. We're all going to die. But then just now, you're saying, like, it was unexpected. Like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. So, our mom, Sharon, died February 23rd,
Hmm.
2021.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
right next to
And
each other.
so she learned she had cancer and died 3 weeks later. And
That's a
I'm the
harrowing
older,
story also.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because like I'm the older daughter and I have a different relationship with my mom than my sister, who was like almost codependent. Well, she was
Hmm.
codependent, like she'll admit that. And when my mom was sick, I actually like live in a different part of Canada than her. She went into the hospital and was like, Blair, I need help like with the cat. I'm like, okay, I'll buy a one-way ticket, no problem. It wasn't, oh, you're terminal. And
Sure.
when I got home, they let her out of the hospital and she didn't look okay at all. And I was like, this, like, selfishly, I'm glad they let her out, but they shouldn't have. But like, she was gray and like looked like she was going, like, she looked like she was dying. And then a couple
Yeah.
days later, we took her back to the hospital because she was in so much pain. And they said, you're covered in tumors. You have 2 weeks left to live. And she died 3 days later. And it's interesting because when that was happening, I was like, oh, she's going to die. Where my sister was in such denial that like
Hmm.
it just wouldn't, she couldn't process it. But then we started talking and she's like, this was my worst nightmare. I'm like, what was your worst nightmare? She's like, mom dying. I'm like, that's crazy because in my head, not once did I think about when mom dies, because my grandma lived to be 91 and her diet was chicken fingers and Chinese food. And she
Sure.
smoked like a chimney and like
Right?
was not a beacon of health. Like she would walk from her house to the bus around the mall and gambled and like so in my head I was like, okay, well mom's not gonna die till she's in her 90s
We don't have
also.
to worry about this today,
So it's
right?
so crazy because like
Yeah.
I've never once thought, oh my God, my big fear is mom dying. And then when I saw mom sick, I was like, she's gonna die. Where my sister's biggest fear is mom dying, and then it was happening and she was in this denial. And it's just so interesting how that happens.
The brain is fascinating, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
It's
And so,
fascinating.
and I think with you, like, I mean, you said you have some regrets, like not treating it as if it was. Like, what were some of the questions you wish you would have asked her?
Well, and that's what's fascinating or fabulous. I'll say fabulous is the first 2 to 3 weeks she was in the hospital. She was awake. She was not intubated yet, right? And we would go and two people could visit her per day. There were all these ridiculous rules because of COVID, right? So it was two visitors a day and that's it. And so we would take turns and we'd rotate. And we would go though. And so if two people, let's say you and I are both visiting today, right? And Blair, you go in the morning and I go in the afternoon. You go in the morning, and of course you're like, give me the update. What's going on? What are doctors
Yeah.
saying? Are you better? How's the medicine? Are you still nauseous? And then you talk to her for an hour, you give her an update on the kids, whatever, you leave. I go in, I start the same shit, right? I'm like, how are you feeling? What's the update? What medicine? And so I went home from one visit. I left and came home, and I have four children, and they're adults. Children is probably the not right. It's not the right legal term for them anymore, but I birthed them, so I'm going to call them that forever. And I remember sitting at dinner with them and being like, guys, like today, I felt really bad because I feel like grandma's trapped in this room, right? And all she gets is this rotating group of visitors who are like, what's wrong today? How do you feel? What medicine are you taking? How many times have you thrown up? Did you poop? What's going like just stupid stuff. And that's an exaggeration, right? Did we also share some fun stories? We played Yahtzee one day. There's, other little fun things in there. But I was like, when I go back to visit grandma, and I think it was like in 2 days I was going back, when I go back, I don't want to do that to her, right? So let's think of a list of questions. Let's come up with a list of questions for grandma. And I have it still in my phone. I opened the notes in my phone. We're all eating dinner and people are just shouting out questions, right? My son said, "Who was grandma's best friend?"
Yeah.
And then my daughter added, "Who was her first best friend?" And then one of the other kids was like, who was her best friend? So we have like three questions on best friends, right? It was
Yeah.
like, who is your first? Who was your best friend? Who's your current best friend? We started writing questions about her marriage and meeting my dad and about her career and about raising children and we were putting funny ones in there too. I think I put in like who is your favorite child and who, things that she would actually probably never answer because she wouldn't want to commit to that. But I wanted to go in and I was like, I'm just going to start interviewing her and learning more about her. Um, then she was intubated and I never got to talk to her again. I never asked her a single question. So those questions all sit in my phone. And one of the things I'm actually talking about with a publisher right now is actually going through the process of interviewing people in her life to try to find the answers to those questions through other people, which of course is someone else's perception of what she would answer, right? We don't know that those would be her answers. I often say to people, I'm the only one who speaks for me, right? Because
Hmm.
anyone else who speaks for me is making assumptions about how I would answer. But it would also provide some closure to something to a door that still is wide open, right? And how fun would it be to talk to her siblings and her friends and her coworkers and her, just everybody and say, do you know the answers to any of these?
I love that. I was just going to say you should put the questions up on Facebook and like kind of get it out there, but
Yeah.
you're on it. You're 18 steps ahead of me. And I love that you did that. Um, when our mom turned really fast, I actually had people I made a Facebook post and I had people under the Facebook post. I'm like, share your favorite memories.
Oh, yeah.
Share your
Yeah.
favorite memories of like you and our mom. But it's interesting because like you're right with the questions. I mean, like it's so hard to know what you don't know, and then they're gone, and you want to know something, and you're like, how am
Well,
I
like
gonna find out?
just like 3 weeks ago, I was, you get those little griefy bursts. I don't cry regularly anymore. I did for a while, but I was at the doctor and the doctor asked me, we're starting to have that conversation about could this be related to menopause or perimenopause, right? These symptoms I'm having. And she was like, when did your mom start menopause? And I was like, I don't know, but my belief is she didn't because she started chemotherapy. And I think that kind
Mhm.
of pushes that process along, right? So I don't think she started it naturally, but
Mhm.
I'm actually not 100% positive. And then they were like, well, do you know about your grandmother? And I was like, well, no, I never talked to my mom about that. But at the
Yeah.
same, your maternal grandmother. But then it occurred to me, my maternal grandmother died when she was 45. My mom was a teenager when her mom died. And so I was like, I doubt. So then I said that out loud. I was like, I doubt she ever did. She died when she was 45. And then the tears started, right? Where you're like, here's this thing that your doctor is like, this is important information, which I don't know how much it really matters. Do a couple blood tests and see where my hormones are at, right? But um, it matters a little bit, and I will never have the answer to that question. I don't know. And so those are things that one of the things I teach people as a death doula is that what is written remains, because all of the things that are stuck in our hearts and in our heads are going to die with us, right? All of that knowledge, all of that history, whether it's something as boring as when did you start menopause or something as thrilling as who was your best friend, if we don't write those things down, at some point we're going to be gone and that legacy is going to be gone with us. But, I wish I knew more. I wish I had been smarter and asked those questions earlier.
Yeah. My so both my parents are gone and I'm 40. My
I'm
grand
sorry.
Thank you, but my grandma's still alive. She'll be
Oh,
92.
wow.
And I was just in Winnipeg visiting the family for the Jewish holidays for the
Yes.
New Year, Rosh Hashanah. And my
Yom Kippur
grandma,
and Rosh Hashanah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to my grandma's house, Baba
Happy New Year.
Leia, and she's actually in one of our books, Resilient
I
AF.
saw that you posted about that.
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's very
Baba
cool.
Leia. Baba Leia is legendary. But anyways, she actually has one of these books where she's supposed to fill in the
Oh,
answers,
yes.
but she's like, I'm not doing this.
Stop it.
It's almost
You
like
have
when
to,
we're
you
with her,
can't
we
use the
have to get,
Jewish guilt to like get her in there to do it.
she's just kind of like, "Ugh, I'm old. I don't want to do this. Like,
Oh,
she, I think, is just like, meh. So I think my
yeah.
sister, when she's there, maybe asks questions. Like, I try to ask a lot of questions. That's why I
Yeah.
put her in our book. I was like, I want to know a story of resilience. And her story is about how her mom, like my namesake, so my great grandma, came over from Russia, where we fled the pogroms, the typical, we're
Yes.
trying to murder the Jews. We fled. They destroyed our property. My grandma came over. She worked in, I think, a popcorn factory, but eventually started a dress shop
It's
in the early
amazing.
1900s.
Where were they?
Winnipeg,
Okay.
Manitoba. And
Yeah.
most of my family is still there.
Okay.
And, anyways, but she was the breadwinner and she worked all the time. So my grandma was raised mostly by like, I don't know I can't remember what she calls them, but like nannies
The
essentially.
community, right?
Well,
Yeah.
nannies, like she had straight essentially like hired help raising her. And then
Oh,
eventually her
wow.
grandpa moved in. But her biggest, like, she had this like resentment of like my mom was never around when I needed her. So she decided when she
Yeah.
was a mom to be a stay-at-home mom. But it's just
Yep.
interesting. So, anyways, I was just like interested to see what story of resilience and like, there's a little bit of like she had one anti-Semitic experience, which is amazing because like I've had like many, and I was
Right.
like, what are some of the stories? And that's like the one that like because she's older, it's all kind of on repeat. But I think capturing stories while you can. So it's like when I'm
Yes.
there, I try to get her to talk and like
I love
tell me
that.
things, and I always learn something new. And I don't know.
Because
I
at some
mean, like,
point, she'll
let
be gone.
this podcast should be a reminder to those listening, like, ask the questions, write down the
Yes.
answers. Like,
Amen.
Kimberly, have you shared this list of questions?
No, no, my husband, my
But I mean, you should
publisher,
share them
that's
because,
it,
like, if they're general enough,
I should. That's a great idea. Like for other people, and you can
there
find
you go.
them
There's your freebie. You're
anywhere,
going to
but
download a freebie and grow your
oh,
email list.
I'll
We're
do
just,
it.
yeah,
The
we're just
list of questions.
So my background's marketing, and offline I was talking about, do you have a gift for our
Yes.
audience? Do you have a freebie? She's like, no, but I should. I'm like, well, we'll come up with it probably during the show.
There it is.
And there we go. It's like a checklist of like find out the cool stuff about the people you love.
And it'd be cool for people to add to it, right? Like
Yeah.
tell me, because it's not an exhaustive list of
Well,
questions
and
you
there's
could
so many
ask
questions you
people.
can ask.
Yes. But just to get to instead of sitting with people and well, especially in the States right now, our Canadian family likes to give us a hard time, but it's so easy to just start these gross conversations about politics and argue and none of it is life-giving, right? Like if this is my last day on earth,
Hmm.
that is not how I want to spend it, is having those conversations.
No.
but it can be so hard to switch to something different. But if you have these handy and you just start asking people, like, who was your first best friend and why do you call them that? Right. And why were they that? And to have that, I think would just one change the dynamic of the room totally because people love sharing their stories. They love it. That's probably why your podcast is so fantastic, right? Because people get to come on. I love when people ask about my mom because I don't get to
Mhm.
talk about her often.
I will
You
always
probably
listen to you talk about Donna.
and me. If you have not shared much about your father, but your mother, your father, those people who are gone, any opportunities us grievers have to tell their stories is so healing, but we can only tell the stories we know, right? And
Hmm.
so if you have people in your life who you have the opportunity to get to know better, you should be. And these conversations are so much richer than any sports conversation or politics conversation or anything else in my humble opinion that you could be having. So,
I agree. Okay, so you're amazing. You so you so
that's nice
you
of you.
so you like went to school for grief and bereavement, the school of life and the school of like school at
Yeah.
Creighton University. And now you're a death doula, you are a grief educator, you're an end of life coordinator, you have a podcast, your business Tomorrow Morning LLC. Like what is it that like you do a whole bunch of things?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was a teacher. So I was a teacher and a school principal, elementary school for over 20 years. And my degree was actually in women in leadership roles within the education system. And I changed it when my mom died. So I was 3 years into my degree work and my research, and I dumped it and said, I just don't give a shit about this anymore, which I think a lot of grievers have that story of something in their lives that they were like, this does not resonate with me anymore,
Yeah.
right? And even teaching didn't. And I loved teaching so much. And I was like, this is for the birds. Like, it doesn't have the same purpose and it's not life giving. And you said something, I think, before we started recording, but how, what did you say? You said it's your goal to live, what did you say, every
Oh, I
day?
want to live a life I don't want to retire from, and I don't want
Yes.
to. So, like,
Yes.
so for those of you who are like, what are they talking about? We just checked in. We're recording on a Monday, and we were just doing a check-in on like, how's your day? And Kim was
Yep.
like telling me how awesome it is and that she loves Mondays. And I was saying, you know what? Like, I've decided to design a life I don't want to retire from. So Mondays to me, like, they're not something to dread. I usually keep them
Love
pretty
those
clear, and I
words.
love Mondays.
Yeah.
And like, why don't we all design a life like that where we don't have to dread? Like, obviously, there's things
Yes.
I dread,
Well,
like,
sure.
like
Yeah.
admin, certain admin
Yeah.
things. I'm very, very like, dready, and
I
I
am
hire people.
terrible at QuickBooks because I don't
Oh,
care, but
yeah, I mean, I'm good at
but you
making
need to
money and
be.
spending money, but coming to
Yeah.
manage the books, I
Oh,
have to hire someone. But,
amen.
but
Yes.
like, we don't need to dread Mondays. We don't need to,
Yeah.
live for the weekends.
So I went through this huge career change because I was like, I don't care about this. And someone said to me, well, what do you care about? And it was interesting because I was fully grieving at that point.
Yeah.
Like the ball filled the jar, right?
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, I decided to let my rage out. And I don't do that very often. I'm a pretty calm person, but I just said, I care that like when my mom died, I realized how awful. I don't know about Canada. I have a decent idea, but like the death and dying industry, there's no education, no one there to help you. We don't know what we're doing,
Yeah.
especially at end of life. I mean, when my mom was actively dying, there were nurses and doctors in and out of the room constantly, but no one said to us, you're probably going to see this or this is going to happen. So we were left traumatized by some of the things we witnessed. They knew it was going to happen, they knew it. They didn't
Mhm.
tell us because it's probably hard to tell us.
Right.
That's baloney, right? And so I kind of started just emptying my anger on this person who was like, what do you care about? And I was like, I care that we are safeguarding information that could be saving people from trauma, that could be helping people to understand that the body knows what it's doing, that these
Yeah.
things are happening for a reason, that dying isn't painful because it's your body knows how to do it. And there were all of these things. No one told us how to plan a funeral. Or if do you have to call the funeral home before you release the body to the funeral home? Do we have to see if they have room? Is there like, do they fill up? Do they not? Zero education, but here's all the paper. And by the way, we need it within 2 hours. We need
Yeah.
it within 24 hours. We need it. You're like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I've never done this before. I get
Yeah.
it that I was destined for it, that I was destined to lose my parents. The only way to avoid it was to die first, which, isn't what I wanted. Yet no one prepared me for this. So I kind of had this like rage moment. No one tells you about grieving, why I can't stop crying, why I have kidney stones, all of it. And I felt like I was overreacting because people lose their moms all the time. Now, I was younger than the average person, but why am I like this? And now I know, Blair, because I've talked to so many people, that most people do feel the way I felt.
Hmm.
But we don't talk about it. We don't share it. So when you're feeling it, you feel like you're doing it wrong or like you need medication or a hospitalization because why can't I shake this?
Right. Well, and you don't shake it.
You don't, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And
Because we
so,
don't know. Like, you're right.
right.
Society doesn't talk about all of that stuff. So experts like you are
And that was
created.
where my passion grew. And I was like, forget this research on women in leadership. I want to research this stuff. And while I was researching it on the side, I also became certified as a death doula. I took separate classes to earn my certification there. And now what my goal is to make death and dying easier for the person who is dying, but also for their family members.
Hmm.
I want their family members to understand what's going to happen and what it's going to look like. And I want the people who are dying to see where they have control, right? That is the ultimate loss of control
Hmm.
because most people that I have worked with are not ready to die. And some have been in their 80s, some have been in their 20s. They're not ready. So, how do I give them control back where they can have it, right? And that's in, do you want to write your own obituary? Do you want to plan your own memorial? We spend hours first talking about how this is shit. You
Hmm.
shouldn't be dying and you don't want to die. But now let's talk about where you have control. What do you want that room to smell like when you're nonverbal? Who do you want in that room? And sometimes I'm the person sitting with Aunt Bethany in the living room because
Hmm.
she's not invited in that room. And I have to remind Aunt Bethany that the person who's dying gets to decide what their death looks like. And I listen to Aunt Bethany's grief and I listen to Aunt Bethany talk about why she's entitled to be in there. And I listen and I hold her hand and I cry with her and I do all of it as a gift to the person who is dying and should get to die the way they want to.
Hmm.
Listening to the music they want to, surrounded by the people they want there, smelling their favorite scents, whether it's vanilla or evergreen or apples or lavender. And then I take what I learn. So, what's great about all the different things I do is that I take what I learn in those situations and get to help the grievers, right? And I take what I learned from the grievers to help those people who are dying prepare their families for what's coming next. And everything I do kind of balances everything else out. And the variety really feeds me and gives me a lot of life. I love writing. I love it. It's very therapeutic for me. I run a writing workshop for grievers and I run a writing group through Writers Rising. We have silent writing. There's a group of us who do silent writing hours where we just gather together and sit quietly on Zoom and write. And then at the end, we have about 30 minutes to share or ask for advice and talk. And so when I write now, I get to write about grief and about death and dying and share that with people. I like talking, so podcasts are pretty easy for me. And, all of it together right now is making it feel like I have a job I don't ever want to retire from, which I hope I don't ever have to.
Well, you won't.
That's my hope.
Like, what
That's my
is
hope.
retirement, right? Like,
I hope it's dying because what's awesome also about what I do right now, and probably you have some of this, is I also get to decide when and how I do this, right? So
mhm.
in some ways that's one of the gifts now too. Like I just worked through the weekend. We had a memorial for one of my clients who was in his 20s, and it was, probably a 400 person memorial, and I worked all weekend, but this Friday my son is coming home from college to visit, and it's my husband's birthday, and I've kept that day wide open, right? So the same can be true as I age. If my husband and I want to go to Europe for 2 weeks, we can, but then I can still write when I get back. I hope, even if
Yeah.
I'm 80, I
Wow.
hope I just keep doing this forever, but that I always have a really healthy balance with living a life that's rich and full and where I just keep seeking joy and trying to help other people.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. All right. So as we wrap up, and I feel like there might need to be a part two, your story is going to be in Resilient AF Skin Deep Stories,
Yeah.
which comes out in December.
Thank you for that opportunity. I
Oh,
love it. I love when what I write can be out there. And I love that that is going to be a book. The story is about my daughter and I. And I love that that's something she's going to be able to show her children someday. So I am really grateful to you for the opportunity for me to have another piece of my story and my legacy permanently in the world. So
I love
thank you.
that. Well, you're welcome. And it's my pleasure. This is my vessel, my give back from everything I went through. Maybe I'll come on your podcast and tell you all about it.
That'd be amazing. We will have to do that. Work on a
Yeah.
swap. I would love
Um,
that.
but yeah, I want to wrap up with you sharing a piece of advice. Now, I'm not going to give you any sort of guidelines for that because of the work that you do and the experiences that you have, but maybe something that's resonating with you from, what you're carrying with you right now. What advice do you have maybe for someone who is going through either something you help your clients through or something similar to what you have been through?
Um, it's so funny. I just led a workshop. I don't know if you've heard of the book, My Wife Said You May Want to Marry Me. It's an amazing book. It's about a woman who was dying, and she basically put an advertisement in the newspaper for her husband because she wanted him to remarry. They still had young children. She wanted them to have a female role model. It's an amazing book, but I have a book club for grievers, and the author visited us, and it was so interesting because we asked him, what is a piece of advice he would give, and this was just recently. And so when you first asked me that, the thing I think of was his response, and he said, "I'm not in the business of giving advice," and it was so perfect, right? Because like you always want to be careful about that because one of the things we know about grief is that it's so individual, right? And it's different for everybody. And so when you start giving advice, there are going to be people listening to your podcast who are going to say, I totally disagree with that because their grief experience was different, or I agree with that because some part of their grief experience mirrored mine. But I think what I can land on instead of the grief part is that knowing and recognizing that you are going to die, right? So, back to that question I mentioned earlier of was it expected? Start expecting your own death, and not in an anxiety ridden, painful way, not thinking it's going to be tomorrow, but expect that you are going to die. That is probably going to happen. I don't think the science is going to change that in any of our lifetimes. And live like you are going to die, which I get is so cliche. And people who hear that think it's ridiculous, but it matters because you are going to die. And so, how are you going to fill your time? How are you going to spend your time? Use that when you're trying to decide whether to say yes or no to an invitation, right? And you can use it to motivate you to say yes and push yourself out of your comfort zone because someday you're going to die and not have that opportunity.
Hmm.
You can also use it to say no because I don't want to be uncomfortable tonight. I want to be comfortable, and that experience is going to be uncomfortable for me. I have a chart that's behind me that's like literally behind my back, and you can kind of see it there if I scooch. And it's the coolest poster that I found that has a little box for every week of your life. And it goes up until like your 80th birthday. And every week you color in one box. And I really like it. And I love thinking about it by the week because I think it's impossible to make every day matter. I think that's why it pisses people off when you're like, make every moment count, because some days you just have to do laundry or go to your breast exam, right? Or like pay your taxes. And we have to do stupid stuff like QuickBooks. You can't make every single day matter and lead a responsible life, but you can make an effort to build your legacy, I think, on a weekly basis. Did I do something when I color that box every Thursday because I was born on a Thursday? When I color that box, I think back on the past week and think, did I do something? And even if it was taking one of my kids to the zoo, or it was a fun date with my husband, or seeing a friend I haven't seen in a while, or if it's something bigger like going on a trip, publishing a book, like did this week matter? And I think that's important. So maybe if you start to think about it on a weekly basis, not a daily basis, and try to fit something into each week that will make you feel like you are living a life of purpose and joy. I think that that would be great.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today on the podcast. If you want to get deeper into Kimberly's world, all of her links are in the show notes. And thank you so much for
Thank
sharing your
you.
story.
I'm sorry I talk so much because you have
What?
good
Isn't that
things
a
to say too.
podcast?
Well, yeah, but
I
I
mean,
said a lot of words.
it's okay. Hey, people
Thank
have been
you.
listening to me for years. It's totally fine. And you know what? Thank you to everyone who tuned in for another episode of Resilient AF. Let us be that lighthouse in the storm for you. It is okay to not be okay, and life is fucking hard.
It
But
is.
you don't have to go through it alone. So just remember, friends, you are resilient AF. Thank you.
Thanks, Blair.
That's a wrap for another episode of Resilient AF with Blair and Alana. And thank you for listening. Are you feeling inspired to bounce forward?
Let's connect at theglobalresilienceproject.com, where you can read many stories of resilience, buy our books, shop our clothing line, learn more about how to strengthen your resilience muscle, be empowered, and more.
Remember, friends, you are Resilient AF.